The suggestion of the introduction of quotas in the Liberal Party has been tabled in recent weeks, following what some are describing as toxic workplace culture in Parliament House.
And the conversation has again rippled out into society at the corporate level, in politics, media and all areas of Australian society of the importance of diversity in gender, ethnicity, age and experience on boards and through leadership roles in companies as being essential. We're joined now by Alison Page, who's the founder of the National Aboriginal Design Agency and an experienced company director. Good morning.
Good morning.
And also with us is Shannon Sedgwick, who's the Senior Managing Director of Ankara, who also sits on a number of boards. Great to have you along.
Thank you.
I want to start with you first, Alison. What does diversity on boards mean to you and why is it important?
Oh, well, I think these leadership diversity on boards is extremely important because it's reflective of society. And if you want great companies that aren't just doing the bidding of the shareholders,
Still no audio.
they're representing a broad demographic, then that has to be reflected in the leadership.
Same question to you. We've seen companies getting into hot water recently on a range of different areas. What difference would it make if there was more diversity on boards?
Well, the statistics show when you look at boards as being more diverse and the community trusts them more, that typically it affects their bottom line and their ability to make decisions that not only benefit the shareholders but benefit stakeholders as a whole. They address issues that affect the community because the community is represented on those boards.
Alison, nods of agreement there, particularly when Shannon touched on trust. What's your experience of that and why is that so important in this discussion?
Oh, it's extremely important. I mean, it's important just within the team itself, within the board itself. You've got to have clarity of expectation. You've got to trust each other. You've got to have alignment. And if you do, then you can actually be more innovative be more creative and look at problems in a much more sort of a broader way, I think. But, for me and, in my experience, I started joining boards, in my mid-20s, so I've had sort of 20 years experience. But when I first joined the boards, I was really too scared to say anything. You're sort of sitting there thinking that you have to have all of the answers. So I think when you've got a really great board and a really great atmosphere in the boardroom, and that's led by the chair, they make it much better for you to say, look, I don't know, or what is the answer? Ask a lot of questions. I don't know what that means. And, that actually is much more difficult to actuate than you think. But if you do want, say, boards that are going to respond to millennials, then you need to have more 25-year-olds on boards. And so you're going to have that atmosphere of trust.
I think that's an interesting point, Shannon, because I think for a lot of people, for a lot of staff, the board seems somewhat removed. What are the actual practical implications of the board? What are the trickle-down implications on their day-to-day?
Well, it affects the business as a whole because the board's function is to drive the strategy and drive the risk tolerance of the business, and so that strategy ensure the operations of the business support that long-term strategy. Now, if they're not considering issues that affect younger generations, you've got to think about over 35% of the workforce is made up of millennials now, and that percentage is growing every year. But we're not seeing any representation of people our age on those boards. Now, the issue comes down to is you see succession planning for CEOs and succession planning for chairs, but there is no succession planning in developing a pipeline and handing on that wealth of experience that these senior boards have onto these next generation of directors. It's almost impossible to get a meeting with them or to, even board director recruiters. They stick to these homogenous circles of the same faces. Now, it's not a zero-sum game for younger and more diverse directors to be part of boards. It doesn't mean that other people have to lose out on opportunities or we have to do away with all the senior members of the board. It's about having a mix that supports the overall strategy of the business and understands millennials are digital natives. We understand, we grew up with this technology, and having that ability to discuss digitization and now the next age of dispersion where things are gyms and offices are going into people's homes, and understanding how that affects businesses and what they should be doing and their long-term strategy is a core ingredient to success in a business. And again, I harp on about this a lot, but the purpose of an organisation isn't to serve its shareholders. That thought has been done away with. It's now to serve stakeholders as a whole, and that includes the community.
But what you're saying is it actually makes business sense as well.
It does. It affects the bottom line. If you look at the Edelman Trust Barometer, organisations who are trusted are 10% more profitable than their nearest competitor without this high levels of trust.
Yeah, you've spoken a lot about that philosophy or purpose for profit, or profit for purpose rather.
Yep.
Alison, that's something that you've also talked quite a bit about. When we talk about succession planning and embedding that into the nature or the fabric of an organisation, are quotas a part of that discussion?
Yeah, definitely. Because usually, like a lot of the boards that I've been on, when there's a vacancy on the board, people start talking about people that they know. And they go, oh, this person's great or that person's great, and then they just start making the decision based on that. So I think, to be able to get that diversity, you're just going to have to start reaching out a lot wider to circles that you may or may not have anything to do with. And so I think the way that boards are recruited will be different. But it will ultimately lead to, if you've got a lot of gender diversity on a board and you've got a lot of different cultures represented on a board, you're going to start looking at a whole different set of values. And, we talk, a lot of boards are motivated by the bottom line, but we do know now that if you have a social return, you start looking at social factors you have those other values on the board that can look at, social impact. That actually has an effect on the bottom line. So again, I think, having diversity on the board can lead to different sort of pillars of sustainability, really, which, ultimately is good for everyone.
Of quotas, at least in the shorter term, until we do see change?
I think gender quotas can work in that short term, but they're not a long-term panacea to all of the ills that are faced by boards and their lack of diversity. There's a good example by the recent hiring of Bridget Ludon, the CEO of Expert 360, who's brilliant. She was hired as, she's the youngest board director on ASX 100, I believe, listed boards. She was hired by John Mullen, the chair of Telstra, but it took him 2 years to find Bridget. Now, I think that points to a larger problem of not having the network or not engaging, as Alison said, with a wider array or building that pipeline of board directors. It's interesting to hear Alison talk about it from her point of view, because it's much the same experience that I've seen, is that homogeneity of boards and the difficulty of breaking into them. But we also don't want to go too far with gender quotas where we're seeing tokenisation happening. And you're not hiring people for their skills, but you're hiring them for their gender or their ethnicity. That can't be the only reason you're hiring them. They have to bring a set of skills to the board. But how would you know that unless you're going out and talking to these wider array of very strong candidates?
And when you talk about that homogeneity, that's boards that are filled with people that look and sound the same, come from similar backgrounds and have similar experiences. That's what that refers to, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And a core function of a board is to have those hard discussions, and that diversity of thought is key here. It all leads to diversity of thought. People who have different backgrounds, different experience, different gender, ethnicity, or religion even, or age, they bring a different set of perspectives and a different experience to the board and can argue things from a different direction. That way the board is fully informed when it's making its decisions. It's not groupthink.
Alison, you said that you got involved in boards from your mid-20s. What would you say to a young person who was considering this?
I think leadership skills are essential. What I learnt on boards is how to be a great communicator, how to challenge and scrutinise, issues, how to problem solve with creativity. So, look, I would say that I think a lot of young people have probably those skills, and that they should, not be afraid as soon as they put their hand up to be on a board, or, do the company director's course, so that you're sort of ready to go, really. But yeah, look, I'm someone who's, you know, I'm not afraid to show my emotions in the boardroom, but that's taken me a little while. So what I would say to young people is, yeah, not to be afraid and not to be intimidated, because a lot of people on boards are a lot older. They've got a lot of experience, and so you do tend to take a back seat. But yeah, if you feel like you need to stamp the desk and make your point, then do it.
Yeah, I agree with Alison. You've got to be quite confident in the boardroom and get your point across. And going back to one of Alison's earlier points about skills needed for the board and how to develop as a younger director is you can't be a one-trick pony. You know, my background's in technology and cybersecurity, but I saw from quite a while back that I would also need that financial literacy in order to understand, you know, the fiduciary obligations of the board and being able to understand balance sheets and cash flow statements and really understanding the core requirements of a board and a board director. And it's not enough to just be an expert in one field. So developing yourself as a holistic package and networking is still extremely important in becoming a board director. It often just comes down to who you know, because as Alison said, it's typically board recruiting happens through conversations with other board directors that go, oh, I know this woman or this guy, they'd be perfect for it.
Yeah.
And that's where it comes to current board directors of thinking about that succession planning and developing a pipeline of people that will lead that organisation into the future and in a successful way.
Yeah, well, I think we could talk about this all day long, as I've spoken to both of you on air about before, and lots of issues that these are the conversations we're having in Australia right now. We are at a time for the moment, though. Shannon Sedgwick, Alison Page, thank you so much for joining us and mulling over these ideas, and I guess firing a warning shot to companies about why it matters to have a whole range of different people from different backgrounds around the table. Jo.
Yeah, thank you both for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Good to see you.
Thank you.